Mastery over life and death was chief among my early pursuits. I began in humility, but my ambition was limitless. Who could have divined the prophetic import of something as unremarkable as a twitch in the leg of a dead rat? I entertained a delegation of experts from overseas, eager to plumb the depths of their knowledge and share with them certain techniques and alchemical processes I had found to yield wondrous and terrifying results. Having learned all I could from my visiting guests, I murdered them as they slept. I brought my colleagues back with much of their intellect intact, a remarkable triumph for even the most experienced necromancer. Freed from the trappings of their humanity, they plied their terrible trade anew, the dead reviving the dead, on and on down the years. Forever. Excavations beneath the manor were well underway when a particularly ragged indigent arrived in the hamlet. This filthy, toothless miscreant boasted an uncanny knowledge of my ambitions and prognosticated publicly that, left unchecked, I would soon unleash doom upon the world. This raving creature had to be silenced, but doing so proved maddeningly impossible. How had he survived the stockades, the icy waters, and the knives I delivered so enthusiastically into his back? How had he returned time and time again to rouse the townfolk with his wild speculations and prophecies? Finally, resigned to his uncommon corporeal resilience, I lured him to the dig. There, I showed him the thing and detailed the full extent of my plans. Triumphantly, I watched as he tore his eyes from their sockets and ran shrieking into the shadows, wailing maniacally that the end was upon us all. I had collected many rare and elusive volumes on ancient herbal properties and was set to enjoy several weeks immersed in comfortable study. My work was interrupted, however, by a singularly striking young woman who insisted on repeated calls to the house. Her knowledge of horticulturalism and its role in various arcane practices impressed me greatly. My licentious impulse gave way to a genuine professional respect, and together we began to plant, harvest, and brew. As time wore on, her wild policy of self-experimentation grew intolerable. She quaffed all manner of strange fungi, herbs, and concoctions, intent on gaining some insight into the horror we both knew to be growing beneath us. The change in her was appalling, and no longer able to stomach it, I sent her to live in the Weald, where her wildness would be welcomed. Simple folk are by their nature loquacious, and the denizens of the hamlet were no exception. It was not long before rumors of my morbid genius and secretive excavations began to fuel local legend. In the face of my increasingly egregious flaunting of public taboos, awe turned to ire, and demonstrations were held in the town square. The wild whispers of heresy roused the rabble to violent action. Such was the general air of rebellion that even my generous offer of gold to the local constabulary was rebuffed. To reassert my rule, I sought out unscrupulous men skilled in the application of force. Tight-lipped and terrifying, these mercenaries brought with them a war machine of terrible implication. Eager to end the tiresome domestic distraction, I instructed my newly formed militia of hardened bandits, brigands, and killers to go forth and do their work. Compliance and order were restored, and the noisome population of the hamlet was culled to more manageable numbers. The ways and rituals of blood sacrifice are difficult to master. Those from beyond require a physical vessel if they are to make the crossing into our reality. The timing of the chants is imperative. Without the proper utterances at precise intervals, the process can fail spectacularly. My first attempts at summoning were crude, and the results disappointing. I soon found, however, that the type and condition of the host's meat was a critical factor. The best results came from pigs, whose flesh is most like that of man. The great thing I had managed to bring through was brutish and stupid. Moreover, it required prodigious amounts of meat to sustain itself. But this was only a trifling concern. After all, I had a village full of it. My zeal for blood rituals and summoning rites had begun to ebb, as each attempt invariably brought only failure and disappointment. Progress was halting, and the rapidly accumulating surplus of wasted flesh had become burdensome. I could not store such a prodigious amount of offal, nor could I rid myself of it easily, possessed as it was by unnameable things from outer spheres. When excavations beneath the manor broke through into an ancient network of aqueducts and tunnels, I knew I had found a solution to the problem of disposal. I could not store such a prodigious amount of offal, nor could I rid myself of it easily, possessed as it was by unnameable things from outer spheres. When excavations beneath the manor broke through into an ancient network of aqueducts and tunnels, I knew I had found a solution to the problem of disposal. My lofty position wasn't always accompanied by the fear of office, and there was a time when I could walk the streets or raise a glass in the tavern without concern for molestation. Faithful as the tide, one precocious village waif made it her hobby to shadow my every errand. It was charming then, troublesome later. In financial desperation, I struck a bargain with the ancient things that surfaced in search of sacrifice when the moon was right. Their price was the delivery of an obscure idol and one other item of more troubling portent. The pact struck. My newfound accomplices slipped silently beneath the brackish water. A fearful stirring at the edge of the torchlight betrayed a familiar witness and gifted me with malign inspiration. Under the blood moon, I lured my wide-eyed prey to the pier's edge. Before she could properly appreciate her position, I clamped on a manacle, chaining her to the leering idol. A small push was sufficient to send both into the icy waters, and when at length the tide receded, jewels of the most magnificent grandeur lay scattered upon the shore. Prying eyes had become a nuisance along the old road, and so I undertook to receive my most curious deliveries by way of marine shipments. A sheltered jetty was accessible by a narrow stone stair off the back of the manor, and a discreet system of pulleys could hoist even the heaviest prizes up the rock face from a securely tied dinghy below. I employed a crew of particularly unsavory mariners, who for a time sailed the four corners at my behest, retrieving many valuable artifacts, relics, and rare texts. Predictably, they increased their tariffs to counter my intense stipulations of secrecy. Such resources had long been exhausted, of course, and so I prepared an alternative payment. While the greedy dogs slept off their revelry, I hexed their anchor with every twisted incantation I could muster, imbuing it with the weight of my ambition and my contempt for their crude extortion. At the witching hour, the anchor pulled with preternatural force, dragging craft and crew down into the depths. They must have cried out, but no sound escaped the swirling black waters. Madness can take many forms, but none so contemptible as man's belief in a mythology of his own making. A worldview buttressed by dogmatic desperation invariably leads to single-minded fanaticism and a need to do terrible things in the name of righteousness. This man is an animal. Rabid, destructive, and incapable of nuanced understanding. He must be put down. Flames on the horizon. Sulfur in the air. The wolves are at the door. A hideous mutation. Unnatural and abhorrent. They would arrive in teeming hordes, adorned in powdered wigs and pretension, seeking to slake their thirst on wine and indecency. As intoxication invariably took hold, innocuous frivolities would escalate to ever more disturbing diversions. Orchestrating the hideous affair was a hunchbacked fiend who seemed to delight in proportion to the suffering he caused. I could have stopped him, I suppose, but I was a slave to my own appetites, and restraint would have rendered me a hypocrite. The feasting and revelry would last for weeks at a time. Great stone tables were set with such an abundance of rare delicacies that we would stuff ourselves until the exotic became mundane. When the lavish spread began to spoil, a ravenous gourmand gleefully proposed that we sample from the fetid pile of composting refuse. The notion was dismissed as decidedly unhealthy. But days later, he was found cackling madly atop a heap of rancid comestibles, licking his fingers in delight. In those younger years, my home was a hive of unbridled hedonism. A roiling apiary where instinct and impulse were indulged with wild abandon. A bewitching predator slipped in amidst the swarm of tittering sycophants. Though outwardly urbane, I could sense in her a mocking thirst. Driven half-mad by cloying vulgarity, I plotted to rid myself of this lurking threat in a grand display of sadistic sport. But as the moment of murder drew nigh, the gibbous moon revealed her inhuman desires in all their stultifying hideousness. Mercifully, the morbid encounter resolved itself in my favor, and I set to work pursuing degeneracy in its most decadent forms. The air pulsed with anticipation as I revealed the unnatural terroir of the house vintage. But my exultation was cut short as the attending gentry turned upon themselves in an orgy of indescribable frenzy. A single drop of that forbidden tannin gifted me with a dizzying glimpse of the hibernating horror beneath my feet, and in that moment, I understood the terrible truth of the world. I stood reborn, molded by newfound knowledge, my head throbbing to the growing wine of winged vermin come to drink the tainted blood of the darkest dungeon. The very grounds themselves are animated by a deep-rooted evil, a cosmic hatred for all that thrive beyond its tainted grasp. Behold the heart of the world, progenitor of life, father and mother, Alpha and Omega, our creator and our destroyer. This day belongs to the light. Beacons in the darkness, stars in the emptiness of the void. Let those dirty beasts worship the mud now. Robbed of their writings, the swine will grow ever more ignorant, if such a thing were possible. Good fortune and hard work may yet arrest this plague. Disinfection at last. Towering, fierce, terrible, nightmare-made material. It is a travesty, a blundering mountain of hatred and rage. Twisted and maniacal, a slathering testament to the powers of corruption. Even reanimated bones can fall. Even the dead can die again. With no living sinew to actuate them, will these walking bones finally fail? How many rats will it take to gnaw through a ton of putrid flesh? The thing is even more horrible in death. Liquefaction cannot come soon enough. The wood is still poisoned. The way is still blocked. But less people will be eaten. Leave her corpse to rot, consumed by the spores she spawned. A setback, but not the end of things. Wounds to be tended, lessons to be learned. Regroup, reassemble. Evil is timeless after all. Failure tests the mettle of heart, brain, and body. You will endure this loss and learn from it. As the ghoulish collection scatters, the rats prepare to feast. A predator is often blind to its own peril. Even in death, the captain shouts his orders, and the crew obeys. The aquatic devils have remade the poor girl in their image. She is their queen and their slave. The madman hides there, behind the pews, spouting his mindless drivel. Squirming, contorting, and ever-expanding, this horror must be unmade. Squirming, contorting, and ever-expanding, this horror must be unmade. A marvel of technology, an engine of destruction. The twisted faces of the damned, piled high and cloaked in malice. The sparkling eyes of youth, twisted and made merciless. We fall so that we may learn to pick ourselves up once again. Do not ruminate on this fleeting failure. The campaign is long, and victory will come. Where there is no peril in the task, there can be no glory in its accomplishment. Ignorance of your enemy and of yourself will invariably lead to defeat. Great adversity has a beauty. It is the fire that tempers. You cannot learn a thing you think you know. The space between worlds is no place for mortal men. It could be dismissed as a fever dream, if not for the corpses. Behold the infinite malignity of the stars. A star-spawned horror. Finally, a sailor's death for captain and crew. Fitting. They are cursed to float forever, deep in the swirling blackness, far beyond the light's reach. Hideous matriarch, vile queen of the aphotic depths, she has no place in the sane world. Seafaring trade, the lifeblood of any port, can resume again now that the routes are safe. Did he foresee his own demise? I care not, so long as he remains dead. It It is as grotesque in death as it was in life. Its destruction is a small consolation, given the implications of its terrible existence. A corpse of twisted metal and splintered wood, at home amongst the headstones. The brigands are undone. Our family crest is once again a symbol of strength. The pungent odor abates. The things are driven back, for a time. At last, wholesome marine life can flourish, if indeed there is such a thing. More bones return to rest, devils remanded to their abyss. More bones return to rest, devils remanded to their abyss. Room by room, hall by hall, we reclaim what is ours. Despite its morbid aspect, this twisted, cavernous maze seems almost traversable. We will find all manner of great and terrible things in this watery tomb. The shifted corridors and sloped walls of our ancestry are beginning to feel familiar. The great ruins belong to us, and we will find whatever secrets they hold. Tokens of hope, recovered from the encroaching dark. The abbot will be grateful. The trappings of his faith have been restored. The flopping fish-like things abhor the warding sigils. Let us claim this place anew. These salt-soaked caverns are teeming with pelagic nightmares. They must be flushed out. The smell of rotting fish is almost unbearable. Recover these lost shipments of rarities, that we may prevent them from falling into even less scrupulous hands. The poor devils, chained and drowning for eternity. I always wondered what became of the unfortunate little waif. The echoes of his mindless tittering reverberate maddeningly. The swine draw power from their horrid markings and crude idols. Tear them down. They breed quickly down there in the dark, but perhaps we can slay them even faster. To prosecute our war against the swine, we must first scout their squalid homes. Even the fiercest beast will lay down when it is not eaten. Steal their food. A nameless abomination. A testament to my failures. It must be destroyed. The thing is more terrible than I can describe. An incoherent jumble of organ, sinew, and bone. Excise the fungal tumors, and the land may yet live. Corruption has soaked the soil, sapping all good life from these groves. Let us burn out this evil. I knew all these paths once. Now they are as twisted as my own ambitions. Our land is remote and unneighbored. Every lost resource must be recovered. There is method in the wild corruption here. It bears a form both wretched and malevolent. The smell of sulfur and gunpowder hangs in the air. The war machine is close. Once, our estate was the envy of this land. I remember days when the sun shone and laughter could be heard from the tavern. I was lord of this place before the crows and rats made it their domain. I see something long absent in the sunken faces of passers-by, a glimmer of hope. In truth, I cannot tell how much time has passed since I sent that letter. The poor caretaker, I fear his long-standing duties here have affected him. The degeneracy of the hamlet is nothing, I fear, when compared to the condition of surrounding acres. My obsession caused this great foulness, and it is shameful that I must rely upon you to set it right. Our family name, once so well regarded, is now barely whispered aloud by decent folk. I can still see their angry faces as they stormed the manor, but I was dead before they found me, and the letter was on its way. There is a great horror beneath the manor, a crawling chaos that must be destroyed. Curiosity, interest, and obsession. Mile markers on my road to damnation. Trouble yourself not with the cost of this crusade. Its noble end affords you broad tolerance in your choice of means. In time, you will know the tragic extent of my failings. Let me share with you the terrible wonders I have come to know. You answered the letter. Now, like me, you are a part of this place. We dug for months, years, an eternity, and we were rewarded with madness. The plume and the pistol, a fitting end to my folly, and a curse upon us all. Can you feel it? The walls between the sane world and that unplumbed dimension of delirium are tenuously thin here. All my life I could feel an insistent gnawing in the back of my mind. It was a yearning, a thirst for discovery that could be neither numbed nor sated. An eternity of futile struggle or penance for my unspeakable transgressions. Another soul battered and broken, cast aside like a spent torch. Those without the stomach for this place must move on. Send this one to journey elsewhere, for we have need of sterner stock. Suffer not the lame horse, nor the broken man. This one has become vestigial, useless. The task ahead is terrible, and weakness cannot be tolerated. It is done. Turn yourself now to the condition of those poor devils who remain. Slumped shoulders, wild eyes, and a stumbling gait. This one is no more good to us. Tortured and reclusive, this man is more dangerous than he seems. She searches where others will not go, and sees what others will not see. Shoot, bandage, and pillage, the dancing steps of war. The thrill of the hunt, the promise of payment. A mighty sword arm anchored by holy purpose, a zealous warrior. To those with a keen eye, gold gleams like a dagger's point. Barbaric rage and unrelenting savagery make for a powerful ally. A lawman and his faithful beast, a bond forged by battle and bloodshed. Elusive, evasive, persistent. Righteous traits for a rogue. He will be laughing still at the end. This man understands that adversity and existence are one and the same. The raw strength of youth may be spent, but his eyes hold the secrets of 100 campaigns. A champion markswoman, keen for a new kind of challenge. To fight the abyss, one must know it. What better laboratory than the blood-soaked battlefield? A sister of battle, pious and unrelenting. A little hope, however desperate, is never without worth. Gilded icons and dogmatic rituals. For some, a tonic against the bloodshed. A man in a robe, claiming communion with the divine. Madness. In the end, every plan relies upon a strong arm and tempered steel. Fan the flames, mold the metal. We are raising an army. A sharper sword, a stronger shield, anything to prolong a soldier's life. Alone in the woods or tunnels, survival is the same. Prepare, persist, and overcome. They must learn more than brutal bloodletting. They must learn to survive. Success depends on survival. Some may fall, but their knowledge lives on. Every creature has a weakness. The wise hero trains for what she will face. A strict regimen is paramount if one is to master the brutal arithmetic of combat. Rarities and curios, sold at a profit, of course. Idol, amulet, or lucky charm, the simplest object can be a talisman against evil. An increasing stockpile of curious trinkets, gathered from forbidden places. The front line of this war is not in the dungeon, but rather inside the mind. Experimental techniques and tonics can overcome things a sharpened sword cannot. Curious methodologies and apparatus can calm even the most tormented soul. Great heroes can be found even here, in the mud and rain. Word is traveling. Ambition is stirring in distant cities. We can use this. More arrive, foolishly seeking fortune and glory in this domain of the damned. With enough ale, maybe they can be inured against the horrors below. Strong drink, a game of chance, and companionship. The rush of life. All manner of diversion and dalliance await those who cross the threshold with coin in hand. The cobwebs have been dusted, the pews set straight. The abbey calls to the faithful. An ambush. Send these vermin a message. The rightful owner has returned, and their kind is no longer welcome. The bellows blast once again. The forge stands ready to make weapons of war. Leave nothing unchecked. There is much to be found in forgotten places. Brigands have run up these lanes. Keep to the side path. The hamlet is just ahead. Most will end up here, covered in the poisoned earth, awaiting merciful oblivion. Make no mistake, we will face ever greater threats. Our soldiers must be ready. Trinkets and charms, gathered from all the forgotten corners of the earth. The cost of preparedness, measured now in gold, later in blood. A mecca of madness and morbidity. Your work begins. Women and men, soldiers and outlaws, fools and corpses. All will find their way to us now that the road is clear. At home in wild places, she is a stalwart survivor and a strict instructor. Fresh kegs, cards, and curtained rooms promise solace to the weary and broken alike. Welcome home, such as it is. This squalid hamlet, these corrupted lands, they are yours now, and you are bound to them. Dispatch this thug in brutal fashion, that all may hear of your arrival. The match is struck. A blazing star is born. The way is lit. The path is clear. We require only the strength to follow it. In radiance may we find victory. As the light gains purchase, spirits are lifted, and purpose is made clear. The light, the promise of safety. The darkness holds much worse than mere trickery and boogeymen. Darkness closes in, haunting the hearts of men. Terrors may indeed stalk these shadows, but yonder, a glint of gold. Secrets and wonders can be found in the most tenebrous corners of this place. And now, the darkness holds dominion, black as death. Circle in the dark. The battle may yet be won. A spark without kindling is a goal without hope. Gathered close in tenuous firelight and uneasy companionship. A moment of respite, a chance to steel oneself against the coming horrors. Huddled together, furtive and vulnerable, rats in a maze. Cruel machinations spring to life, with a singular purpose. Curious is the trap-maker's art, his efficacy unwitnessed by his own eyes. Mechanical hazards, possessed by evil intent. Ambushed by foul invention. Ancient traps lie in wait, unsprung and thirsting for blood. Carelessness will find no clemency in this place. Watch your step. Mind that such missteps are the exception, and not the rule. Even the cold stone seems bent on preventing passage. Such blockages are unsurprising. These tunnels predate even the earliest settlers. Nature herself, a victim to the spreading corruption, malformed with misintent. Another mariner, another misfortune. Without tools of iron, you must rely on flesh and indefatigable purpose. Gnawing hunger sets in, turning the body against itself, weakening the mind. To fall for such a little thing, a bite of bread. Packs full of steel and war, but nary a thought given to the plow. No force of will can overcome a failing body. The requirements of survival cannot be met on an empty stomach. Soothed, sedated. A momentary abatement. The wounds of war can be healed, but never hidden. Compassion is a rarity in the fevered pitch of battle. Surgical precision. Vigor is restored. The blood pumps, the limbs obey. The flesh is knit, patched up, if only to bleed again. Death cannot be escaped, but it can be postponed. A death denied, for now. Death is patient. It will wait. As the fiend falls, a faint hope blossoms. Confidence surges as the enemy crumbles. Press this advantage. Give them no quarter. Their formation is broken. Maintain the offensive. Continue the onslaught. Destroy them all. Executed with impunity. Another abomination cleansed from our lands. Begone, fiend! Back to the pit. Another one falls. Decimated. Obliterated. Destroyed. Eradicated. Annihilated. Prodigious size alone does not dissuade the sharpened blade. Their cursed champion falls. Monstrous size has no intrinsic merit, unless inordinate exsanguination be considered a virtue. The bigger the beast, the greater the glory. A victory, perhaps a turning point. A death by inches. Great is the weapon that cuts on its own. Slowly, gently, this is how a life is taken. The slow death, unforeseen, unforgiving. A decisive pummeling. A powerful blow. A devastating blow. Impressive. The ground quakes. A singular strike. Well struck. Precision and power. Masterfully executed. How quickly the tide turns. Mortality clarified in a single strike. Grievous injury. Palpable fear. Such a terrible assault cannot be left unanswered. Death waits for the slightest lapse in concentration. Exposed to a killing blow. Ringing ears, blurred vision. The end approaches. Unnerved, unbalanced. A dizzying blow to body and brain. Weakened. Diminished. The will to fight falters. Confusion, nerves, and panic. Gnawing uncertainty, the birthplace of dread. Festering fear consumes the mind. The horror. The abyss returns even the boldest gaze. The blood quickens. A brilliant confluence of skill and purpose. A time to perform beyond one's limits. Inspiration and improvement. Perched at the very precipice of oblivion. A hand's breadth from becoming unwound. Teetering on the brink, facing the abyss. And now the true test. Hold fast, or expire. As life ebbs, terrible vistas of emptiness reveal themselves. Survival is a tenuous proposition in this sprawling tomb. More blood soaks the soil, feeding the evil therein. Another life wasted in the pursuit of glory and gold. This is no place for the weak or the foolhardy. This is no place for the weak or foolhardy. More dust, more ashes, more disappointment. These nightmarish creatures can be felled, they can be beaten. Seize this momentum. Push on to the task's end. This expedition at least promises success. As victories mount, so too will resistance. Success so clearly in view. Or is it merely a trick of the light? Remind yourself that overconfidence is a slow and insidious killer. A trifling victory, but a victory nonetheless. Be wary. Triumphant pride precipitates a dizzying fall. Ghoulish horrors, brought low and driven into the mud. Impressive haul, if you value such things. Ornaments, neatly ordered, lovingly admired. Such a burden of finery risks life and limb. A full pack often attracts unwanted attention. True desperation is known only when escape is impossible. Cornered, trapped, and forced to fight on. No chance for egress. Will this be a massacre? This skirmish may be lost, but the battle may yet be won. A wise general cuts losses and regroups. The sin is not in being outmatched, but in failing to recognize it. injury and despondence set the stage for heroism or cowardice. One can sometimes find clarity in madness, but only rarely. Madness, sublimity of the intelligence, or so it has been said. The bulwarks of the mind have fallen. Behold, the abyss is made manifest. A moment of valor shines brightest against a backdrop of despair. Adversity can foster hope and resilience. A moment of clarity in the eye of the storm. Anger is power. Unleash it. Many fall in the face of chaos, but not this one. Not today.
Ruin has found you at last. My protege, my friend. Our calculations were correct. The ephemeral equation is unbalanced. The Earth spins on a strange and terrifying new axis. And everywhere, unbridled consequence. The world is a wasteland of failures past. And yet, you must ride out into it, unafraid. Take this. It is hope, the very last of it. It is yours now. You were bold once. Be bold once more. Free yourself from this suffocating stillness. Fix your gaze on the horizon. And face the fearsome truth of the darkest dungeon.
Grave Robber. Chapter 1. Luxury's Lap. Born into money and married into more, she spent her days on horseback and her evenings in the ballroom. She was the object of her husband's boorish lust and drunken temper, placating his worst tendencies with a veneer of gracious deference, all the while indulging murderous fantasies of freedom and the fortune that would soon be hers. Chapter 2. Nightcap. Night after night of disrespect and abuse, enough was enough. She listened, smirking, as his empty apologies came in desperate, choking gags. Chapter 3. Embarrassment of riches. Years of decadence and financial mismanagement had left the estate in staggering debt. Humiliated and facing eviction, she wandered the empty halls, hurling inebriated indignities at the portrait of the deceased, whose hand had rested so possessively upon her shoulder. A gleam of gold on that painted paw reminded her that his rings were unaccounted for, and must have been buried with him. Chapter 4. Filthy Rich. To preserve her social standing, she would pilfer the rings from his fingers, the gold from his teeth. She was awash in exhilaration, the glint in her eyes outshining the fistful of ill-gotten gains. Chapter 5. The After Party. Armed officials dispatched to oversee the eviction were shocked to find the front doors listlessly ajar. The lavish carpets were lousy with dirt and leaves. A heap of heirlooms gleamed on the ballroom floor, rings and brooches in a careless pile.
The lady of the manor, however, was nowhere to be found.
Hellion. Chapter 1. The Eve of Glory. She was young to join the war band, but any who challenged her readiness were met with clenched fists and violent indignation. Having bloodied the last of her detractors, the matter was considered finally settled. On the eve of battle, she joined her clanmates in a raucous celebration, her stein and her spirits overflowing with abundance. Chapter 2. The Brave. She was the tip of the spear, poised to sunder the enemy line, to live forever in the songs of her people. Her entire life spent in preparation, but when it mattered most, she had failed. Chapter 3. Night in the Woods. As the advancing army moved on, she huddled tightly in the tree's clammy roots, hoping to be somehow swallowed up into the earth. At dawn, she woke tormented by the exuberant cries of carrion crows, come to feast upon the corpses of her kin. When at last she stirred, the scavengers took flight, repulsed by the sight of this undeserving revenant. Chapter 4. Shame and Exile. She had shunned a warrior's death, and her cowardice would be impugned. They cast her out, an exile, unwelcome and unsung. Chapter 5. The Great Emptiness. Alone and untethered, she wandered the countryside, fighting for sport and soaking her wounds in wine. She sought death at every turn, desperate for a second chance to prove her mettle. But it seemed even that terrible wraith had forsaken her. Her isolation was absolute, her shame barely concealed by a fragile facade of fearlessness. Highwayman. Chapter 1. Freedom. A prison riot. A fleeting chance to escape incarceration. He would be a fugitive, a hunted man, but a free one nonetheless. Chapter 2. Laying Low. Harried by a pursuing garrison, he took refuge in the fetid canals of the city. Concealment took its toll, and soon he began to see himself in the furtive, scurrying pests that formed an unfortunate portion of his meager diet. Freedom, once so fondly imagined, had become a vortex of degradation. Chapter 3. One last job. He was sick and starving, and in desperation offered his expertise to an unscrupulous malefactor. Shackled once more to an unsavory task by an advance of gold, he lined his belly, girded himself, and prepared for one final heist. Chapter 4. Highway Robbery. The stagecoach arrived, and he set himself to the business of bloodshed and robbery. He fulfilled his obligations with exceptional lethality, but his grim satisfaction would prove short-lived. Chapter 5. Shackled. The lifeless bodies of a woman and child, horribly mutilated by errant gunfire, stared spectrally through the remnants of the coach door. Arrested by the ghoulish sight, he felt the cold chains of remorse tighten around his heart. Guilt was a pursuer he could never outrun, a prison he would never escape. Jester. Chapter 1. Some strange melody. He was a layabout without aspiration or purpose, content to loiter on street corners, languidly busking for passers-by. Roughly ushered from the bustling commercial blocks, he wandered the forgotten corners of the city. An intoxicating melody drifted over a nearby cemetery wall, and he stumbled deliriously amongst the tombstones in search of the performer. Chapter 2. Music of the Night. He could learn this unearthly hymn and claim it as his own. Ambition, so long dormant within him, had been roused. He delighted in fantasies of fame, renown, and respect. Chapter 3. Play to the crowd. When word of his uncommon talent reached the palace, he was summoned to entertain king and court. Anticipating an historic performance and enthused adulation, he was stunned to find himself instead the object of their debased ridicule. While his noble audience dined drunkenly, he was mocked, tortured, and subjected to an obscene array of dangerous and decadent humiliations. Chapter 4. A Dark Song. He unleashed his resentment upon instrument and crowd, playing the demoniac melody with unrestrained fury. This was the song of the dead, and it had exacted a fitting tribute. Chapter 5. Finale. Bowing low, he basked in the echoing applause of dripping blood. The scene of wholesale dismemberment drove him to fits of mirthless hysterics. He was laughing still as he placed the blade against his own hand, severing his connection to whatever twisted talent he had so fleetingly enjoyed. Aimlessly he drifted from the hall, humming broken bars of a discordant melody he could not quite remember. Man-at-Arms. Chapter 1. A Premature Promotion. The politics of a military career are perhaps as treacherous as war itself. Though untested in combat, his acumen for advancement was unmatched. Through a dubious campaign of influence and intimidation, he had at last claimed a coveted command, and was eager to bask in the glory of the victories that were sure to come. Chapter 2. A Leader of Men. Behold the conquering general, marching his men to victory. A rout, a massacre, a complete and total failure of command. Chapter 3. One Eye Open. Every night, the men of his regiment would interrupt his fitful convalescence. Mutilated and maimed, the spectral garrison clawed at his bed covers, whispering hateful truths in his ears. The exhausted attendants in the field hospital would wake to the sound of panicked screaming and inglorious sobs. It was not the war that had taken his eye. It was pride. Chapter 4. Ghosts of the Past. Demoted and disgraced, he returned to the battlefield, ready to endure the wrath of his regiment and grant them some small peace. At last, he would sleep undisturbed, and perhaps find some comfort in that murky abyss of dreamless wonder. Chapter 5. In the trenches. He resolved to spend his remaining years seeking atonement in the trenches of bloody battlefields the world over. For him, there could be no respite from the horrors of war, and when at last he was struck down, he would die alone and unremembered. Surely, he deserved no better. Occultist. Chapter 1. The Ritual. On certain portentous evenings carefully selected for their astrological potency, he would gather his devotees around the ancient onyx table, and joining hands with them, would send his spirit out into the void. Safely tethered by their vital energies, he was free to wander the outer spheres in search of some dark communion and impossible power. Chapter 2. A Door in the Desert. He found himself in a vast expanse of windswept dunes. Ahead, the stone spires of a pyramidal temple called down jagged bolts from a rolling, angry sky. Undaunted, he crossed the threshold of the towering aperture, settled himself upon the central dais, and prepared for the coming sacrifice. Chapter 3. Some parts must die. Terrible though it was, he would pay the price for power. The emptiness in him called out across boundless gulfs of unknown space, for nature abhors a vacuum. Chapter 4. The Guest. Drawing vitality from the assembled mediums, he would hold fast against the thing and harness a portion of its power. Imbued with strange currents of infernal origin, his apotheosis was complete. Chapter 5. An Eternal Flame. Emerging from his trance, he met the charred, steaming corpses of his acolytes with a shudder. He could sense the eldritch entity stalking the edges of his consciousness, probing for weaknesses. He had become a beacon, a conduit to unknown regions, and would be assailed by those blasphemous forces all the rest of his days. Plague Doctor. Chapter 1. The Good Student. Brilliant and bold, her unconventional theories created nothing short of a scandal in her 4th year. The mocking whispers and scornful glares of her peers and professors had an ironically invigorating effect upon her extracurricular experiments. The mysteries of the human body, of life and death itself, hovered just beyond her scalpel's reach. If only she could acquire a corpse of sufficient freshness. Chapter 2. Head of the Class. Her professor was a relic, hacking and wheezing his way through a hopelessly conventional curriculum. She delighted in the combative debate, and behind her bookish glasses, reveled in their outrage and confusion. Chapter 3. Extra Credit. By the 2nd semester, her research was at a critical point, and regular supply raids of the university laboratories had become necessary. During one such expedition, she stumbled upon her professor, awkwardly slumped over his podium, a bloody kerchief on the floor. Here, then, was her ideal cadaver, her long-awaited opportunity, and she would not waste it. Chapter 4. failing grade. Success. Vindication. The human machine restored to action. The shrieking and wailing was horrible. But the silence that followed was even worse. Chapter 5. Do no harm. Disposal of the body was a procedural affair. A carboy of acid would dissolve the thing and no evidence would remain. In the weeks that followed, however, she found herself unable to focus, sitting motionless at her desk, paralyzed by the ceaseless wailing that reverberated in her mind. Runaway. Chapter 1. The Pigs of St. Martha's. Her pious caretakers had marked her for the last time. Tonight, she would escape their cruelty at last. She ran blindly into the rain, the squeals of the pursuing sisters lost in the howling wind. Chapter 2. Beloved. Good fortune is a rare and wondrous thing. She straggled from place to place, drenched and hungry, until a kindly woodsman and his wife happened upon her. Childless themselves, they welcomed her into their home, where she warmed herself in the glow of their hearth and hearts. Chapter 3. Drawn to the flame. She would stay up long into the night, tending the fire. Captivated by its shifting hues, she thrilled to the eerie dance of spark and ember, running her fingers absent-mindedly over the scars that patterned her arm. The hearthlight seemed somehow alive, and in these private moments, she yearned to reach out and be touched once again by its searing embrace. Chapter 4. Burnt Offering. An accident, but surely there was time to contain the flames. The walls were alight. There was no stopping it now. Chapter 5. Ashes. She stood in the center of the inferno, transfixed by its swirling kaleidoscopic beauty. Her rapturous fixation was cut short by a heavy beam falling from the ceiling, blocking the door. Panicked, she dove headlong through a window as the cabin bloomed into a pyre. Heaped upon the wet grass, she heard the screams of her adoptive parents, trapped and burning in their bedroom. Collaboration confers advantage. A calculated generosity, but a welcome one nonetheless. A simple kindness. Persistence will overcome even the greatest of threats. She searches the dying world for the keys to her own salvation. Once she had a sliver of decency, now only greed. The antiquarian wants what we have, and she will not be denied. We tread beyond the realms of reason. The walker from beyond the stars, a shambling horror. A star-spawned child of the infinite void. Each covets what the other has, and plots to take it. Cruelty and callousness have claimed dominion here. There is nothing between them now. Nothing at all. Resentment, the slowest and deadliest poison of them all. Narrowed eyes, muttered threats. All trust is lost. Restless souls thrive in chaos they create. Animus grows in proportion to mounting pressure. Suffering strengthens the bond. While the heart still beats, desire will never die. Aspiration unites the hopeful. Two facets of the same stone, never one without the other. Tried and tested, a bond to be counted on. Empowered, emboldened. Cooperation is the key. In crisis, we can rely only upon each other. This wound, at least, has been tended to. Welcome relief from caustic agony. Extinguished at last. The pulse slows. Sanity returns. A little help impeccably timed. There is comfort in company. An interminable conflict. Fight through the fatigue. Sweat-soaked brows, unsteady stances. Exhaustion takes hold. Cowardice, a crude term for the science of self-preservation. Recalculating one's odds is never a wasted endeavor. Recognize your disadvantage and accept it. When myriad variables align themselves against you, it is wise to desist. Steady yourself. And now, the greatest test of all. Once again, teetering on that terrible precipice. Let us hope they find peace. An unforeseen complication. A slow suffering begins. This is no time to falter. Anxiety foments insidious fears. Stumbling and stupefied. Bafflement and vexation. A setback, nothing more. A breakthrough. Excellent work. A brilliant conclusion. Lethality writ large. Stupendous. Bravo. A master stroke. Well done. Weaken them, that another may finish the work. Dragged back from the brink. Self-reliance is a rare and wonderful thing. A slow dissection. An unavoidable end. All problems have their solutions, even the big ones. The unrelenting application of violence yields morbid gains. A resounding response. They falter, so press your advance. Take heart and do not relent. The smallest variable can make all the difference. A deliberate and methodical appliance of harm. A steady subtraction, an invariable result. Let us hope to finish this quickly. A promising development. Early results are encouraging. On to the next. One less obstacle in our path. Another impediment, cleared with impunity. Messy, but effective. The work continues.
a righteous action. A petty hindrance. A simple variable, easily resolved. A lesson taught is a lesson learned. Straightforward and effective. A trivial worriment. Easily dispatched. A trifling matter. Elementary. A simple solution. A miscalculation, perhaps. Mistimed, misdirected. Haste and carelessness, hallmarks of the unprepared. An opportunity, squandered. Fight on. There is no way out or through. What matters most is we reach the mountain. Alive, if possible. Cut down these nightmares and blaze the trail to your redemption. The past is gone. Let it die. We are the flame, burning brightly for all the world to see. Though unpleasant in the extreme, this work is noble and necessary. We will see them again. I am sure of it. In life or in death, we are all prisoners here. For every miscalculation, a consequence. It is low indeed to profit in destruction. The pitiless stamp of cloven hooves can be heard ahead. The hooded watchers howl to their horrid kin. Let nothing mar your path. Crushed beneath thundering hooves. An unexpected find. Abandoned or forgotten, it is ours now. In crisis, no gain is insignificant. A festering impasse, tended by toothy fiends. They stand guard even now, deathless and dreaming. The lost souls of a dying world, empty of hope and humanity. Stumbling and grasping, shadows of what they once were. Echoes of humanity, twisted by hopelessness. The worst kind of parasite, opportunists. Pillaging brigands, enriching themselves as the world collapses. The time for denial has passed. You must face your failures, or be consumed by them. The crossroads. Wait by the lantern's light, and welcome what help may come. Onward once again, though all the world's horrors bar the way. The flame, sacred and sputtering, the last hope for us all. Forward now, into the crumbling chaos of the world. When you are ready, this rutted roadway will finally take you home. The road is yours to travel, but you are not alone. The crossroads, where lost souls hope to find their way. The crossroads, a place between places. The crossroads. Who will step forward into the light? The crossroads. A beacon for the broken and the battered. A simple choice. At least it should be. An elementary problem, is it not? Think carefully. Today's oversight is tomorrow's regret. Myriad options require careful deliberation. The destination is never in question, only the route you take to get there. When deliberation is exhausted, trust your instincts. Consider all variables, but do it quickly. Your collection can wait. Press onward. Analysis is invaluable until it becomes an excuse for inaction. All that matters is the flickering torch you bear. Onward while there is still time. We must keep moving. Destiny will not be denied. Procrastination of the inevitable is futility itself. The loathing spreads. The loathing consumes. The loathing abates. The loathing festers. The loathing whispers. The loathing howls. The seat of your denial, perched precariously in the murky gloaming. Indistinct and ill-lighted. No comfort awaits you here. The house on the borderlands, half swallowed by the stain. Your sanctum, adrift in this bituminous nightmare. Up ahead, a light in the limitless expanse. Forward now, into oblivion's inky embrace. Push ahead, beyond the reach of this tenebrous malignity. The colliginous cathedral, malign temple of the Iron Crown. Behold, the source of the stain, gateway to incomprehensible emptiness. The nightmare gate is revealed. Beyond, only infernal nihility and non-existence. The mind must be freed of its self-imposed incarceration. At last, the world's mind is free to remember a time before the cancerous corruption. You came here seeking solace, but found stagnation instead. This was a beautiful place once. What a pity. The leaves fall, never to grow again. Onward, and let us hope enough yet remains of the world. The greatest horror, it would seem, is nothing at all. An ocean of emptiness, slowly swallowing the world. While the flame still burns, hope remains. A nebulous nightmare, an apocalypse that only we can oppose. How many souls are lost forever in this lightless obscurity?
stagnant and sprawling. This hellish abyss extends beyond sanity itself. We travel through the incalculable dimensions of human weakness.
You have cowered in your crumbling denial long enough. The flame grows stronger. The Odyssey strengthens you. Knowledge and experience, twin yardsticks of progress. Each milestone makes the next road just a little easier. Do not despair. There is nobility in the attempt. Remain undeterred, and you will yet prevail. Learn from each attempt. Deepen your understanding, and victory will come. Try and try again. You will break through this gloaming murk. On and on, over and over, until the truth is laid bare, and you are finally free. At last, the veil begins to lift. The shadow's advance has been halted. For a time. Success, so long pursued, is rewarded only with creeping revelation. The flame sears the skulking shadows from the darkened corners of the earth. Pity the great denier, chained by its own command. I remember our first meeting on the steps of the university. A collegial handshake that would doom us both. Your insightful questions during my lectures gave me pause, and I recognized in you something of a kindred spirit. Despite our differences in age and position, we shared a keen fascination for archaeology, folklore, and of course, occultism. Interminable faculty socials became something of a delight, knowing we'd abscond to a quiet table and lose ourselves in riveting discussion and passionate debate. Commonalities between the mythos of ancient cultures was not a new area of study for either of us, but it was there that we first noticed the pattern. We spent long nights immersed in crumbling, worm-eaten volumes, plumbing the forbidden secrets of antiquity. Between semesters, we would spend our days rambling the woods, talking excitedly of esoteric theory and ancient mysteries. The university's resources were impressive, and yet, on occasion, we relished in first-hand experience. You were my brightest student, my research partner, and my dearest friend. It was you who found the cipher, scribbled hastily in the decaying margins of some long-forgotten tome. Scribbled in blood. Whether by providence or happenstance, we stumbled upon the mark of some strange power invoked the world over, reflected in cultures predating mankind itself. The Iron Crown, enigmatic and ubiquitous. A semicircle, radiating 5 points of power. A symbol hidden deep in the iconography of every ancient empire. You see, Even your valley is not immune to the spreading stain. The bulwark of your denial is giving way. Are you shaken? There is so much worse in store. Push on to the inn. Rest and resupply await you. You can feel it. A change in the air. The winds whip more harshly on the far side of the brook. The point of no return welcomes you with open arms. Comforts are exhausted. Ahead, only trial and tribulation. Each gravestone is more than a failure. It is a promise to do better. Echoes of allies reverberating in the void. To attempt and fail is no shameful thing. Tread carefully and quickly. This is swine country. Hidden in warrens and ancient waterways, the swine proliferate unseen and unchecked. Behold, the great cities of man, ruined and aflame. Rubble and flame, as far as the eye can see. Unhinged by the impending apocalypse, the fanatics burn book and building alike. Centuries of human learning and achievement, ruined by riotous contempt. The fanatics feed themselves to the fire, their flesh melting like candle wax. The rancid crop grows unchecked and abhorrent. Voracious and decadent, the landowners and peasants alike descended into an orgy of consumption. They emptied their larders, gorging themselves as the world began to crumble. First, they ate the rotten flesh of their animals. Then, still hungry, they turned upon themselves. They thrill to the succulent flavor that grows up from some nightmare pit far beneath the earth. War rewards only resignation. Resigned to the end of things, they waited for death, and still they wait. Emptied of mind and spirit by some existential shock, the poor devils roam aimlessly amidst the trees. These seasoned soldiers were deployed to a winding front, meant to prevent the cult's descent from the mountain. When the cult came, no orders were shouted, no swords were drawn. There was only stupefying horror, and the catatonic lethargy that follows it. At last, the great ziggurat, temple of failure and regret. You painted without rest for days, babbling incoherently about distant, half-imagined places. The inscription reads, "The sacrifice of hope opens the gate to ruin. Offer of yourself if you crave the void." We reasoned that the mind must be dissected if it is to be understood. Death comes for the rich and poor alike. A warrior's death, redemptive and transcendent. Every road must end. The final chord is struck. Go with grace into the great beyond. At last, the battlefield has claimed its due. He will drift among the stars. Nothing can survive such a wholesale, organic failure. Extinguished, she can run no further. Despite being in perfect working order, it remains damnably stuck just before 12. An early experiment. Gird yourself and don't stand too close. We found the pathetic creature chained to an obelisk, a half-mile beneath the old church ruins. The theory at the time was that harm could be rendered to a subject by proxy. The well-worn seat of our research, still littered with notes, diagrams, and dusty journals. I regret ever buying that cursed clay from which sprung this anathema. Recovered from the sunken temple off the wind-whipped coast, it emanates an antediluvian power. We were able to replicate the dark song, albeit in a more conventional key. It would be unwise to open this hateful portal, if memory serves. The tools of violence, despicable and dangerous. A regrettably necessary acquisition. A bit of comfort on the road to damnation. Something to ease the rigors of the road. A sound investment in roads yet untraveled. Anything that lets us travel further is worth the cost. Trinkets and baubles paid for in blood. Such power in such a little thing. Even the worst habits can be overcome. We need not be defined by our shortcomings. The odds of illness are high. Best to be prepared. Tonics, tinctures, and remedies. The science of hope. The treatment is harsh, but undeniably effective. We can suffer no sickness on this pilgrimage. We must preserve what is best in us. Strength comes in many forms. Any advantage is a good thing. Bolt it on and be off. The mountain will not be denied. Good. An improvement. This will serve well. Reconfigure. Meet each challenge on its own terms. Experimentation. Your academic instincts serve you well. It cannot fight, but perhaps it can calm. A little company for the long ride ahead. Abandoned waterways, home now to far worse than rats.
unmapped, unexplored, a risky proposition. Our great cities burn, all that beauty and knowledge, ash on the wind. Another nameless city, another inferno of mutilation and madness. The tainted crop continues to spread its tendrils of rot and pestilence. The farms and fields of our kingdom overrun with putrescence and rot. Mud and rain, resignation and death. This land is truly barren. Trenches and tents, the front lines of a war that was never fought. The first of many forks in the road. Choose your path and ride out unbowed. Everywhere in ruin, everywhere in need. The provinces and cantrevs of our land, crumbling and undone. Every road a winding torment, every turn bent on our destruction. Rain, fire, and rot. Is there no sanctuary from this madness? Consider your position and plan accordingly. Conventional fare, but fairly priced. Precious relics remind us of a time before the end. Spend what you can, or wealth no longer has meaning, if indeed it ever did. Learn what can be taught, that you may stand just a little taller at the end. Listen, practice, improve. One learns quickly when survival demands it. Rest tonight, under the mountain's unblinking gaze. The fire is lit, the table is set. The inn awaits its favorite guests. There are yet places such as this, where a little light still gathers. Rest now for a time. The roaring heart does much for the weary body, even more perhaps for the restless soul. Lower your guard, soften your gaze. It is safe here. We would come here in summers of years gone to write, think, and rest. The place is a little worse for wear, but familiar nonetheless. The familiar hearth crackles invitingly once again. An accomplishment worth remembering. Let them know us by our reputation. Your coach must be maintained if it is to carry you where you must go. Each improvement, a new variable in the equation of your fate. Planning and mindfulness, as vital to survival as sharpened steel. The next stop is leagues away. Plan accordingly. In this world, wealth is worthless without purpose. Scavenge what you can, and be off once more. An impressive haul. Put it to good use. The means of mastery. Experience, however painful, is the greatest teacher of all. By confronting the past, we learn to face the future.
Your coach is laden. You can carry no more. The Wainwright awaits, eager to ply his trade. An inkling of potency still lingers in some of these well-worn relics. Amidst the spoils, an artifact of unparalleled power. A fortune in memories long forgotten. Avarice slips unseen into the catacombs of the mind. Beneath bloodlust and fury, there is emptiness and shame. Hunted, harried, a fugitive seeking to outpace the past. A murderous melody lingers long after the final chord has been struck. Making peace with adversity is the very essence of existence. Pride, more devastating than the horrors of 100 campaigns. To know the abyss, one must embrace it. Indiscriminate science stains the surgeon's hands. Nothing remains save a burning will to survive. Reliable information brings accurate insight, after all. Perhaps you are finding your courage at last. Chaos must be met with unwavering resolve. You will fight so that others may flee. Supplies this way, if you can make it. Up ahead, the seat of our regrettable research. Ahead, a bestial refuge, littered with bones and less identifiable remains. The avatars of oblivion, clergy of the spreading stain. I trust you have calculated your odds carefully. This will not be easy. Look ahead, a place to reflect, remember, and reconcile. Let us hope the madman's scrounging has borne fruit. If you hope to heal, you have chosen wisely. At last, respite within reach. A refreshing commune unburdens the mind. This is no place for decent folk. Lost and desperate, they need your help. Let us temper this world's cruelty, just a little. The flame sputters. You must give hope to get it. The value of such a view is matched only by its unsettling awfulness. Everywhere, in all directions, destruction has claimed dominion. Look to the horizon and lament. The fog is parted. Our way is made clear. They revel in debauchery, debasing themselves in the face of the end. Your path lies through them, and so they must fall. Pity a soul so twisted by despair. To arms, though it brings no satisfaction. Slow, vacant, and resigned, the lost battalion shambles on. They had honor once. Now they have nothing at all. Plague eaters, feeding on the tainted crop. Toothy and corpulent, slaves to their hunger. Lament the knowledge taken by the fires of these fanatics. Emboldened anarchists, desperate to exercise their nihilism. Swine folk, indulging their vileness in the dark. No choice. The brutish creatures must be confronted. A sanctum of tranquility awaits. Joints ache and muscles burn. The body requires attention. She weeps for the fallen and knows she will join them soon enough. She understands the futility of her work, but undertakes it nonetheless. She heals the injuries of others, while ignoring her own. His stifled smirking betrays a malign madness. He struggles to decide what is real, holding back fits of laughter and tears. He chatters incoherently, but his prices remain fixed. His attention is unfocused, as though he is in two places at once. Who will face the half-remembered horrors of their past? We must understand the past if we are ever to be free of it. This is a den of absolute evil and wretchedness. Prepare yourself. Foul winds and foul tidings. No doubt the source is within. Beware what awaits you inside. Steel yourself. The hulking horror inside will not fall easily. Within every keep, a general and his loyal lumbering guard. He has retreated, undying, into a dream, and there he must stay. Locked in a nightmare slumber, he is tortured by failures both real and imagined. The landowner's manor. Do you hear the child's cries? The harvest is here. Pity those with a place at the table. Born to a corpulent, half-eaten mother, the child is a ravenous avatar of degeneracy. The library burns, and with it the remains of philosophy, reason, and insight. The conflagration must be stopped. The librarian must be destroyed. He teeters madly upon his ladder, reveling in the fiery destruction of human accomplishment. Emptiness and dissolution have wormed their way into the world. Behold, the infinite emptiness of the void. Reality comes asunder before our eyes. The beautiful illusion that was the world, fragmented and undone. Sharpen your blades, that we may properly excise our portion. An academic's study, full of the forbidden and the forgotten. Rummage through the shelves, laden with echoes of indistinct ideas. This unkempt study evokes a feeling of the familiar, does it not? A place of research and inquiry. A monument to a once prestigious career. Perhaps I left this for you. Perhaps you left it for yourself. Perhaps it is not here at all. my wealth and possessions, bundled into this meager pile. Take up these goods and imbue them with purpose. Karma abhors waste. Best to take all you can. Let us hope their desperation can be eased. Facing oblivion, these folk have kept their honor. Have you? You must be strong enough to shoulder more than your share of the burden. Desperate and wanting, will you rebuff their earnest pleas? Look upon their noble struggle and be humbled by it. Giving in to madness is easier than holding out against it. They are heroes. It is a difficult thing to face the past, and even more so to reconcile with it. Acceptance requires honesty, painful as it might be. Only when we acknowledge the past can we be free from it.